NBA schedule going to be released. Playing around with Jazz rotations. Plus, 14 years old, going to 8th grade, still sleeping with his blankie, but he has a college scholarship. It's all coming up on tip-off. Boom, 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 boom. I made a dreadful mistake in my life. Boom, 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 boom. I actually slept. I slept a lot. Boom, 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 boom. And now I'm tired. If I don't sleep, I'm never tired. Boom, boom, boom. But if I sleep, I'm tired. Good morning. It's tip-off. Sorry, a little delayed. I actually made a bunch of stuff yesterday with our son's birthday and the such, and so instead of going riding and doing all my morning stuff, I decided to see if I got some sleep, if it'd be good for me, and I've decided that sleep is bad for me. So bad that I've lost my first notes of the morning tip-off. These are my notes every morning, by the way. See, things like that, and then things like this. That's for those of you on YouTube. How is everybody? Schedule comes out today. I will have a blog post the minute I get a hold of it. Give you guys some thoughts. Look at it. I'll build you a 5-game pack or something like that. That if I were a fan I was buying, I would buy that. But the key things to look at are can you particularly with the amount of new little pieces we're going to have. The first thing I'm going to look at on the schedule is there any can you gain some early momentum? I mean, last year's schedule was so easy early, and I think it gave us a huge advantage because then we had a little wiggle room when we struggled. So is there anything early in the season that can get us kind of going? Traditionally, I think we've had some luck when we've gotten those kind of East Coast teams coming across early in the year, and they're on the early road trips, and they're not quite ready for it. I've always thought those were good games for us. Then the negative thing you're looking for is the 5 games and 7 nights hopefully will go away with an 82-game schedule, but look for that. And back-to-backs to me goes a little bit each way, but the killer back-to-backs is when you move east. So if we play in LA and the next night at home, if we play here and the next night Denver, or Dallas, excuse me, Denver's not as bad, but it's not good. It doesn't have a time zone problem, but it has Stapleton Airport. I always look to see where our Texas games are. We usually get killed on some of those. Those are just losses the way the schedule maker makes them. So those are the things I would look for beyond my personal family dates that you don't care about. The other one is I like an early season road trip for the team to come together. We traditionally do it pretty early in November, but let's look and see if that trip exists. Last year, you'll recall, it didn't really exist, and I don't know, in that funky schedule we had last year if that impacted us or not. And then the other one just to look at is anytime you're overloaded. So anytime you suddenly play a bunch of games at home, there's going to be another stretch where you play a bunch of games on the road, because as O'Connor will say today, when asked about this, every schedule's got 41 home, everyone's got 41 road, and everyone's got to play them all. Like, in other words, you just don't complain about it. But if you're given an advantage somewhere, you're going to get it taken away. And so see if you can find where those are, because that's what happens. You get nice scheduling for a while, and then you flip it. It comes back and gets you, and just see where those are. And then the final one is always that end of the year. I think is interesting, but I view sometimes the end of the year is really too hard to project, because you can look at it and say, oh, that looks brutal, and 2 years ago it turned out to be, and last year it didn't. Because sometimes other teams aren't putting it all out there. Who would have thought at the end of the year, when we first looked at it last year, we closed the year with Dallas, Portland, Orlando, Phoenix, Portland last year. Well, that sounded brutal, but it turned out to not be that bad, because Portland had thrown in the tank, Orlando wasn't that focused, and Dallas was kind of in a funny state. So I don't think you can guess the end of the year. So I always want to see if the beginning of the year gives us a break. And then obviously Miami's coming to town, Boston's coming to town. I was thinking about Jimmer, Damian Lillard with Portland. And it was funny, last year with Jimmer, I remember thinking to myself, we better get the Jimmer games early. It didn't turn out this way, but we better get the Jimmer games early, because there's a chance he drops out of the rotation late in the year, which kind of happened. This year, I'd actually argue we want Sacramento late, because with Sacramento late, I think he can work his way back into the rotation, but I think he'll be out of the rotation when the year starts. And then the final one is, I don't know if you know this, you play all of your divisional teams 4 times. You play all of the Eastern Conference teams 2 times. But those middle Western Conference teams, so those other 10, is it 10? Yeah, 10 Western Conference teams, I think, that are not in your division, there's about 3 or 4 of them you only play 3 times, and probably 4 of them you play 2 at home, 1 on the road, and 1 home, 2 on the road. And it's worth checking to see what those are, because that's really actually where the schedule quantitatively can be easier or harder. You don't want, we've had this happen, you suddenly don't want, Sacramento is probably the worst team in the West. Golden State, New Orleans are probably 2 of the lesser teams in the West, and after that I don't know who's left. Maybe Portland won't be as strong as a playoff team, but you certainly don't want all to be playing, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, and all the good teams 4 times, and those guys only 3 times. That is going to hurt you in the run. I was playing around with lineups for the Jazz. Just play with me here for a second. So my guess at this point is you start Mo, Gordon, Marvin, Favors, and Jefferson. That's kind of going to be your traditional lineup. That right there has a bench of Foy, Burks, and Millsap, and whatever other piece you want to throw in there, and how you want to use it. You need a 9th player rotation. We'll play with 10, so Cantor will be in it, and then you probably have a 9th guy in the rotation. But that's the Foy, Burks, and Sapp, pretty good. Actually, this reminds me a little bit of last year, where I thought we were able to put out 48 minutes of pretty solid basketball all the time without huge lulls, though then we got into that Cantor-Favors lineup, which did struggle badly together, and kind of worked away from that as the year went on, or at the very end of the year. That year was so fast you couldn't work away from anything. It just happened. But then there were some fun lineups I put together. Like you could go big still with Mo, Gordon, Millsap at the 3, Favors, and Jefferson. You can go insanely athletic and small with Mo and Foy, Gordon and Marvin playing with Favors, and you might be pretty good defensively there. Foy is a decent defensive player. The other 3 guys are all pretty good on-ball defenders. Marvin struggles a little bit at the 4, but not that badly, depending on the right lineup, and you could be pretty tough to guard in that. You play Mo with Gordon, Marvin at the 3, Millsap and Favors, and you probably can switch everything 2 through 5 defensively, not to mention play some pick and roll, do some things. Bring Burks into that lineup with Foy, and you go small on the guard line with Mo, Burks, and Foy. Play it with Millsap and Jefferson, or Favors and Millsap, however you want. And you got a bunch of guys on the perimeter trying to break you down, and some of them decent distributors, others not. There's a lot of different flexible things we can do. You kind of have a power lineup with Jefferson, how you're playing Jefferson and Favors, or Jefferson and Sapp. Favors and Millsap. Those 3, then with Cantor working his way in there somewhere, but I think a lot less pressure on him to contribute when those 3 guys, there are 96 minutes to be divided there, and I would suspect that Favors, Millsap, and Jefferson are each grabbing, close to 30, so there just aren't a lot of minutes for Cantor. I'm sure they'll find a way, and the season just never works quite that way that everyone's available. Someone pointed out on my Facebook page, and you can follow me at David Locke for kind of life stuff, including pictures of my little guy when he was born yesterday for his 10th birthday, and then Locked on Sports for sports stuff. And I'm going to increase Facebook discussion. That's kind of one of my goals here on the social media stuff. I think that's been really good, and then gotten away from it a little bit. The Facebook, somebody pointed out that actually the addition of Foy and Marvin Williams may take some minutes away from Cantor, which I actually think might be really a true point, that, as long as you've got Hayward, Marvin, Foy, and Burks, unless Foy rolls in and really can play the backup 1, there aren't a lot of minutes for Millsap at the 3, depending on that lineup. It's not going to be a natural thing for Ty to go to. He's going to have to really, and even when I was playing around today and trying to figure out all right, if my first sub is Sapp and he comes in for Jefferson, then I've got a pretty athletic team, and then I bring Foy in for Mo and let him play the backup 1 to start, and then Burks comes in for Marvin, and now I've got Foy, Burks, Hayward, probably Sapp and Favors, kind of an interesting lineup there. Uh, if that actually works. Gordon would probably have to do a lot of the ball handling. Then I sub back around, and even Marvin's ability to slide down and play some four and take, you just don't. Marvin's minutes at the four are going to be limited because there aren't that many available, and Sapp's at the three are going to be limited, which is too bad because that lineup, I think, has got to become a part of what the Jazz do. So Ty's got to find a way to get that in there. So we'll see. I was just playing around with all of those things. Just a few. I mentioned this yesterday, but just a note again on Karolinko. The Jazz cannot sign and trade him. So he goes and signs his $10 million deal with 2-year, $20 million deal with Minnesota, and there's nothing the Jazz get for it. He's just gone. And I'm not sure I want to be paying Andre Karolinko $10 million a year if I'm the Jazz. If I'm Minnesota, maybe it fits their cap and they line it up right, and it might work well for him. It's the right kind of town for him. I think it's a pretty good signing by Minnesota. I'm not sure I think it would have been as good a signing for the Jazz. I think if Karolinko was willing to come back at $5 or $6 million, and he's a high-level bench player, then we probably could discuss whether you'd rather have him than somebody else we signed. But I don't really trust his. It's not like he shoots and you think it's going to go in, but he is incredible defensively. The Jazz really believe, by the way, that the biggest upgrade they've made, we're all talking about three-point shooting, but the Jazz people, they really believe the biggest upgrade they've made is that Mo and Marvin's on-ball defense is a huge upgrade from what they've had in the past. I don't know where Randy Foye fits into that as well. I've got a lot of questions from people about, well, do you think this lineup improves Hayward this or this guy Jefferson? I touched on this yesterday. I like the questions. Please keep them coming. But let me just share with you, fundamentally, I don't actually believe in the concept. And I know this is very contrary to what most people believe, but I actually think I can prove it statistically, that unless you're playing with LeBron or Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or Stockton and Malone, your individual performance is pretty consistent year to year, regardless of your teammates, regardless of the system you play in, regardless of the players you play on the floor with. Hayward will come close to establishing his year 3 baseline performance this year, and that'll be it. I mean, Jefferson really has not been a vastly different player in Utah than he was in Minnesota, and there couldn't be a larger change. And you go look at when players switch teams, their efficiency, how they play, what they do, really looks very similar, no matter who their teammates are and what their teams are. So just realize that. And so do I think Hayward will be improved? No. I think the team will be better because those guys are better. But I think Hayward will be Hayward. And we'll see if I'm right on that. Final thing, the story out of the University of Washington that a 14-year-old going into 8th grade, Tate Merrill, has been offered and accepted a scholarship, or he hasn't been offered, I guess, commits. Because you can't. And LSU is also recruiting an 8th grader, and USC did it a year ago. I have two thoughts on this. One is they're probably right. I mean, I don't know if anyone's talking about that angle. LSU and Washington are probably right. I'm going to guess if you go down to these Southern California quarterback camps and find the best 12 and 13 and 14-year-old kid in the camp, that they are also the best 17-year-old kid. And so you probably are recruiting this kid in 3 years, and the chances probably are that by the time that he's going to be the best kid, if he's the best kid at that age, he's probably the best kid as well. The one thing I would check on this kid that jumps out to me a little bit is that he's 14 and going into 8th grade, and I would like to know his birth date on the Gladwellian element of things. If you've read Gladwell's Outliers about how what we don't at a young age, we do not do a good job of scouting talent. We scout age. If you look at the national hockey teams out of Canada, they're almost all kids born in January, February, and March. And the reason for this is that what happens is these kids get grabbed at this early age, like Tate Martell at 14 years old or at 13 years old or 12 years old or whatever it is, and they get grabbed at such an early age that really all they are is just physically stronger than the other kids. They're not better. And then from that moment, because they are physically strong, and this may actually happen at 11 or 12, they then get more coaching because they look better, and then they in turn become better. But you're not actually doing a very good job of scouting talent. And that's the one thing I would wonder on this. If I was an opposing coach or someone of that sort, I would certainly be grabbing and looking into, uh, you know, I keep an eye on the birthday thing. If this kid's a January birthday and he got held back and so he's just bigger and stronger than every other kid, then you may not be actually getting talent. You might be getting age. And I also think if I'm Kyle Whittingham and I sometimes have to get the second tier or third tier recruit because the top kids are going to the other schools of the Pac-12, I would certainly be watching the birthday game. That the kid that was born in April or May or June or July, that maybe May, June, or July, or depending how football's broken. If it's, I don't know how youth football, if it's by grade, if it's by first of the year. I know ski racing is first of the year, so you early on the January, February, March birthday kids are all better than everyone else, and then as time goes on, you'd assume that that equals out. But I would keep an eye on that if I was Kyle Whittingham, and really, if I see that kid that's born in May, or maybe even if football's a first year, born in October, uh, and he looks like he's pretty good, and suddenly realize, hey, he's 9 months older than these other kids at whatever age. That's a lot, or younger. That's a lot. So keep an eye on it. There's something completely fundamentally wrong with recruiting kids in eighth grade and getting them. But on the other question I have is they might be right. And I don't know what that does to the system, and I don't know how you ever stop it. Um, but like my dad sent me an email last night, all fired up about it, the college football, and kind of this implication inside of it was the purity of college football, and that I have to say is, clearly the biggest joke of all, right? I mean, with the, I'm a huge believer you never know what's really going on the day of, but if you go take the headlines of the last 3 years and put them together and actually read them collectively, you probably can figure out what's going on. Okay, well, in college football, if you go read the collective headlines of the last 3 years with the various TV contracts and conference movements and recruiting 14-year-olds, don't. Hey, it's great to put on your red or put on your blue and be true to your school and have that connection to the team, but don't give me any purity argument. See you.